After calling China the most serious competitor to the U.S., President Joe Biden on Sunday said his administration will be prepared for, quote, extreme competition with China, fueling more speculation on the prospect of China-U.S. relations going forward. On the other hand, some high-profile officials in the Biden administration have expressed willingness to work with China on climate change, while urging China to do more and saying that the U.S. will not trade other issues for anything that has to do with climate. So how much common ground do China and the United States actually share on climate change? And what is China's positions on these issues? Joining us for the discussion is Thomas Gehl, ChildWise International President and former environmental advisor to U.S. President Bill Clinton, and Han Hua, Research Fellow at Chongyang Institute at Renmin University here in Beijing. Welcome to both of you. Let me go to you first, Dr. Han. In a CBS interview clip aired on Sunday, President Joe Biden said, he's willing to, he's prepared for extreme competition with China, and his approach will be different than that of Trump. He said he will, look at the rules of the road. What's your reading of President Biden's message here?
Well, I think it's a quite general but also a strategic positioning towards Biden's administration towards the U.S. China relations, which is good actually, because the strategic one, because from the last administration, the United States, the consensus, the bipartisan consensus, not only from the administration but also from the Congress, is that China is the strategic competitor. So it's a natural flow of the strategic extreme competition with China, the positioning. But saying in general, I think because Biden needs to deal with the domestic issue first, like the pandemic crisis, like the economic recovery and growth, like the unemployment. So many domestic issues waiting for him to deal with. So I don't think his foreign policy, even especially the foreign policy towards China, is quite stable. He's still using the media platform, the CBS, not only the press conference, not only the phone calls, the bilateral phone calls with some other allies, but also the media platform to send out the messages, to test the waters regarding the Sino-U.S. relations from the Chinese side. So I think by positioning the relationship as extreme competition, because when you say competition or competitors, it's kind of the two parties need to have a same goal or similar goals, that we compete each other, but it can be optimistic if both can get some positive results out of that.
Well, very interesting perspective there. Let me go to you in Washington, D.C., Thomas, or rather in southern China, Thomas. What's your reading of President Biden's message here to Beijing?
Well, I think that it's a very consistent message from where the Democratic administration has been through Obama's term and President Biden's term now, that the United States wants to work on solving these issues. The United States was a leader before in the Paris Accord, along with China. Again, they work hand in hand to really make the original compact, and so I'm glad to see the same players back in harness now to be able to embrace the issue again and get further resolution and further groundwork done on it.
Well, but Thomas, I don't remember any other Democratic president, not Bill Clinton, not Barack Obama, certainly not Jimmy Carter, nor any other president, of the United States, saying that China is the most serious competitor. Do you think Biden really meant it, or was he really pressured by the GOP's and the general opinion?
Absolutely, no. I think that there has been a change to the Trump administration and with Congress in acknowledging that China has made great strides in their economy and their influence on the world. So I think to a certain extent it's a backhanded compliment to China to say that they have done so well in the world economy, that they are the #2 economy in the world, that they are a country that needs to be dealt with, as an equal and as a competitor. So as I say, it's the acknowledgement that the United States now sees China for the power that it really does wield in the world economy.
Right. Ms. Han, let me go to you in Beijing. It's really interesting that you said Joe Biden is kind of testing, the water to see how Beijing would react. After all, he's not calling the leadership of China. He said he would. And also, he's not, addressing this issue directly. He was asked by a CBS reporter, Nora O'Donnell, about how he will deal with China. So we know that Beijing's position towards Washington has been pretty consistent. How do you think Biden may act in the months and years ahead?
Yes, Beijing's foreign policy has always been consistent. It's very interesting that you ask about whether the United States presidents, especially the Democratic presidents, has ever saying something about a strategic competition with China before. But the bilateral relations, like other relations or other phenomena, it's always been evolving. Like Thomas just said, China has become the number two world largest economy and the world leading market. So it's natural, it's understandable for the United States to figure out gradually, not on one day, probably in several months or in the past or in the years to come, to figure out how to deal with China, with a current China. So it's quite understandable. But Biden also said that but it's also a fact that the two presidents, China and the United States, they have been knowing each other. They have been met before the two become the top position for each countries. So they have a lot of foundations of knowing each other better. And also Biden inherited this administration in a very negative asset, in that China and the United States have been suffering the lowest point of the bilateral relations since the two countries established the formal diplomacy relations. So it will. I think China, being very consistent in its own foreign policy and its policy towards the United States, has to be also very patient to give Biden some time to think through about its policy towards China, especially the cooperative areas like the climate change, like how to deal with the pandemic in a global sense together.
Right, talking about climate change, U.S. Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, said on multiple occasions that the U.S. wants to cooperate with China, but John Kerry also said we have serious differences with China, quote. He also said we all know none of those issues will be traded for anything that has to do with climate. Thomas, how do you read John Kerry's message here?
Well, I think it's, again, very consistent with the message of the United States Democratic Party that this is a serious issue and they want to deal with it on that level. They've been very good cooperation in the past with China on the issue, and I think that now he's saying that we want to continue that type of relationship and moving forward. But I think he's exactly right that it's not bundled as a trade-off to other trade concessions. And I think China is even though they said recently that everything is interrelated, that China on its own has done more than any other country in the world in the last decade on these serious issues. So I think President Xi has, in the past 2 5-year plan, has had it as number 1 or number 2 in his policy decisions. So again, China takes the climate change very seriously. So I think the United States and China will work very effectively together. We're the top, 2 producers of greenhouse gases in the world. 40% of greenhouse gases are by the combined countries. Both China and the United States have said that they will try to be net zero by 2050 and 2060, respectively. So that's a great goal to set, and I think it is accomplishable.
Yeah, Ms. Han in Beijing, let me go to you. Talking about climate change, Joe Biden said when he thinks of climate change, the answers to it, he thinks about jobs in the United States. He said building modern and resilient climate-related infrastructure and a clean energy future for the U.S. would create millions of well-paying union jobs. Is that at least one reason that he may cooperate more with China on climate?
Yes, of course. I think when he said about the jobs, when he said about the opportunities emerged with the climate change cooperation, he is very sincere. And speaking about the consistency in the foreign policies, I still want to say, in climate change in particular, I still want to point out, if you have ever been living in Beijing for the past 5 or 7 years, be it a foreigner or a Beijing native, he or she would see the great change of the government's dedication and seriousness and the sincerity about changing the climate, not only for the bilateral relations, but also for its own people's interests. So it's the consistency and it's the practices and it's the examples. So speaking of the consistency in the climate change policy from the U.S. administration, I actually have a little bit doubt. I think it's really consistent within the Democratic Party's policies, and it's always on its priority list. But thinking of the past 4 years, the United States withdrawal from the Paris Accord, for example, I have to be a little bit doubtful about its consistency in the, say, after the 4 years. But still, let's hope that at least the two countries can work together for this current 4 years, but work start from now as soon as possible on the climate change, because it's not only about the people of the two countries, but it's also about the interests of the people of the global community, because the world is seeing how the U.S. and China would react to the climate change, how to address the climate change together, how to cooperate in this technology and information sharing, because there is a lot of technology and information sharing in the climate change cooperation. So it does not only need sincerity, seriousness, bearing in mind of its own people's jobs and opportunities and the people's livelihood, but also the livelihood of the global community, and to do something concrete to cooperate.
Right. Thomas, when Biden labels China as America's most serious competitor, do you expect that competition to be zero-sum?
No, I think that there is an opportunity for cooperation with our greatest competitor. I think that allows further growth for both countries, and I hope that is what both administrations will strive for, to find the common denominator for both countries to be able to prosper while increasing both of their economies. So there are many things that both countries want from one another, need from one another. So I believe that is coming, and that with an administration led by knowledgeable professional people, we'll be able to find.
Yeah, we do hope that the two countries can work something out. Thomas, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Sorry to cut you there. Thank you both so very much, and thank you for watching The Point.
Thank you.
I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.